The stars burned bright against the black void of space as Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human ship Defiant. His crew of 23 had been traveling for 6 months, mapping unknown star systems far from Earth. They were explorers, not soldiers, and their ship carried scientific equipment instead of heavy weapons. "Captain, we're picking up some strange readings ahead," said Amy Ross from her communications station. She was young, barely 25, with short brown hair and quick fingers that danced across her control panel. "There's a lot of energy. Activity in the next system?" Jake walked over to look at her screen. The readings showed massive power signatures, the kind that came from large spacecraft. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Hard to say exactly, but it looks like hundreds." "Maybe thousands." Amy's voice carried a note of concern. "The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Dr. Helen Wade looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life, a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Captain, I'm detecting 3 distinct energy signatures. They're different from each other, suggesting 3 separate technologies." "3 different alien species?" Jake asked. "That would be my guess. And based on the power readings, they're all much more advanced than us." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity had been exploring space for over a century, but they had never encountered alien life. The discovery of 3 different species at once was both exciting and terrifying. "Take us in slowly," Jake ordered. "Pete, make sure our engines are ready for a quick exit if we need it." Pete Collins, the ship's engineer, was a stocky man with calloused hands and an easy smile. He had been working on starship engines for 15 years and knew every bolt and wire on the Defiant. "Engines are running smooth, Captain. We can jump to hyperspace in 30 seconds if things get ugly." Lisa Grant, their pilot, was already plotting escape routes. She was small and quick, with reflexes that made her one of the best pilots in the human fleet. "I've got 3 different exit vectors ready, Captain. Just say the word." The Defiant moved carefully toward the unknown system. As they got closer, the true scale of what they were seeing became clear. The space around the 4th planet was filled with warships, and they were all fighting each other. "My God," whispered Amy, "it's a battle, a huge battle." Jake stared at the main screen in amazement. He had never seen anything like it. Ships the size of small cities fired weapons that lit up space like tiny suns. Explosions bloomed and faded as vessels were destroyed. The fighting was spread across millions of kilometers, with 3 distinct groups of ships attacking each other. "Helen, can you identify the different factions?" Jake asked it. Dr. Wade was already working on it. "The ships on the left are long and sleek, colored blue and silver. Their weapons appear to be pure energy beams. The ships on the right are organic-looking, like they're grown instead of built. They're firing some kind of biological projectiles. The third group has ships that look like they're made of crystal or glass. They're using some kind of shield technology I've never seen before." "How long have they been fighting?" Jake asked. "Hard to say, but the debris field suggests this has been going on for a while, maybe days, maybe weeks." As they watched, a massive explosion marked the death of another ship. Jake counted at least 50 vessels destroyed in just the few minutes they had been observing. The scale of destruction was beyond anything in human history. "They're not just fighting," Lisa said quietly. "They're slaughtering each other." "But why?" Amy asked. "What could be worth this much death?" Dr. Wade had been studying the battle patterns. "I'm starting to see something interesting. Each group seems to have advantages against one enemy, but disadvantages against another. The blue ship's energy weapons are very effective against the organic vessels, but seem to be blocked by the crystal ship's shields. The organic ships can overwhelm the blue ships with numbers, but can't seem to coordinate against the crystal ships. The crystal ships can control the organic vessels somehow, but are vulnerable to the blue ship's energy weapons." Jake began to understand. It's like a 3-way rock-paper-scissors game. Each faction can beat one enemy, but loses to another. "Exactly, and that means none of them can win. They're locked in a permanent stalemate." The implications were staggering. If Dr. Wade was right, This battle could go on forever, with millions of lives lost and nothing to show for it. Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the ship. "Captain, we're being scanned," Amy reported. "One of the blue ships has detected us." On the main screen, they watched as a sleek blue warship broke away from the battle and headed toward them. It was 10 times the size of the Defiant and bristled. "With weapons, should we run?" Lisa asked, her hand hovering over the hyperspace controls. Jake considered their options. They could escape easily, but this might be humanity's first chance to make contact with alien life. "Hold position," he decided. "Open a communication channel." "Captain, that might not be wise," Dr. Wade warned. "We don't know their intentions." "We don't know anything about them," Jake replied. "And we never will if we run away." The blue ship stopped just outside weapon range. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then Amy's communication equipment started receiving a signal. "I'm getting something," she said. "It's not in any human language, but the pattern suggests they're trying to communicate." "Can you send a response?" "I can try. I'll use mathematical sequences to show we're intelligent." Amy began transmitting simple mathematical concepts. 1 plus 1 equals 2. The square root of 9 is 3. The value of pi to several decimal places. After a few minutes, the alien ship responded with more complex mathematics. "They're definitely intelligent," Amy said. "And they seem curious about us." Dr. Wade was studying the alien ship's design. "Captain, I'm seeing damage on their hull. They've been in heavy combat recently." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Amy, try to communicate that we want to help. Send them medical and repair symbols." "Captain, that could be seen as an act of war by the other factions," Dr. Wade warned. "Or it could be seen as an act of compassion," Jake replied. "We're not taking sides. We're just helping someone who needs it." Amy sent the message. The response was immediate. The alien ship began transmitting what looked like star charts and technical specifications. "I think they're accepting our help," Amy said. "They're sending us docking coordinates." Pete looked worried. "Captain, their ship could fit a dozen vessels. Our size, if this is a trap, we're in serious trouble." Jake looked at his crew. They were all scared, but they were also curious. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "Take us in," he ordered, "but keep the engines ready." As the Defiant approached the alien warship, Jake wondered what they were getting themselves into. He had no way of knowing that this single act of kindness would be the first step toward ending a war that had raged for 2 centuries. The blue ship was even more impressive up close. Its hull was smooth and curved, like it had been carved from a single piece of metal. Strange symbols covered its surface, and it hummed with barely contained energy. As the Defiant docked, Jake realized that humanity was about to take its first steps into a much larger and more dangerous universe, but he also realized that sometimes the most important steps were the ones taken in kindness rather than fear. The alien docking bay was huge, easily large enough to hold 20 ships the size of the Defiant. Strange blue lights lined the walls, and the air shimmered with an energy field that allowed the human crew to breathe without spacesuits. Captain Jake Morrison led his team through the airlock. Dr. Helen Wade carried her medical kit, while Pete Collins brought emergency repair equipment. Amy Ross had a portable translator device, though none of them knew if it would work with alien languages. The first alien they met was 7 feet tall with blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Its face was humanoid but angular, with large, silver eyes that reflected the strange lighting. It wore what looked like armor made of the same blue metal as the ship's hull. "I am Commander Veltar," the alien said in perfect English, though its voice had a musical quality that made every word sound like a song. "We have learned your language from your transmissions. You are the species called humans." Jake stepped forward, trying to hide his amazement. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. This is Dr. Helen Wade, our medical officer, and Pete Collins, our engineer. We detected damage to your ship and wanted to help." Veltar's large eyes studied them carefully. "You offer aid to strangers in the middle of a war zone. This is either very brave or very foolish. Maybe a little of both," Jake admitted. "But We believe in helping those who need it. The alien commander was quiet for a moment, then gestured for them to follow. Come, I will show you what you have stepped into. They walked through corridors that curved and flowed like living tissue. Though they were clearly made of metal, the walls showed images of star systems and battle formations. Jake realized they were looking at a war room filled with tactical displays. This conflict has lasted for 212 of your years, Veltar explained. My people, the Zephyrians, fight against the Krillian Hive and the Nexari Federation. We have fought so long that some of us have forgotten why the war began. Dr. Wade examined the tactical displays with scientific curiosity. The battle formations are incredibly complex. Each side seems to have developed strategies specifically to counter the others. You are observant, Veltar said. The Krillians swarm like insects, overwhelming individual ships through sheer numbers, but their hive mind makes them predictable. The Nexari use their psychic abilities to coordinate perfectly, but they cannot understand minds that think differently. We Zephyrians are warriors and builders, but we fight alone and cannot adapt quickly. Pete looked at the damage reports scrolling across the screens. With respect, Commander, it looks like none of you are winning, Veltar's expression darkened. Winning? We lost the ability to win decades ago. Now we fight to survive, to prevent the others from destroying us. Jake studied the tactical displays more carefully. The patterns were becoming clear. In every major battle, the three factions would engage each other, cause massive damage, then withdraw to lick their wounds. No one ever gained lasting advantage. What started this war? Jake asked. Territory, resources, fear. Veltar's voice carried the weight of centuries. The Krillians expand constantly, consuming everything in their path. The Nexari seek to unite all minds under their collective consciousness. We Zephyrians simply wanted to be left alone, but neither of the others would allow it. Amy had been quietly working with her translator, studying the alien language patterns. Commander, are there any neutral parties, anyone who mediates between the factions? There is the Galactic War Council, Veltar replied. They oversee prisoner exchanges and maintain minimal diplomatic contact, but they have given up trying to end the conflict. They believe it is impossible. Dr. Wade looked up from her medical scanner. Commander, I'm detecting elevated stress hormones in your system. When did your crew last have proper rest? Rest is a luxury we cannot afford. The enemy never sleeps. The enemy is probably as tired as you are, Dr. Wade said gently. Exhaustion leads to mistakes, and mistakes lead to unnecessary deaths. Veltar stared at her. You speak of our enemies as if they were people like us, aren't they? Jake asked. They're fighting for their survival, just like you are. The alien commander was quiet for a long moment. You are either very wise or very naive, I am not sure which. Pete had been examining the ship's damage reports. Commander, I might be able to help with some of these repairs. Your power coupling systems are similar to ones we use, just more advanced. You would help us repair weapons that might be used against other sentient beings? I would help you repair engines and life support systems that keep your people alive. Pete replied, What you do with weapons is your choice. Over the next few hours, the human crew worked alongside the Zephyrians. Dr. Wade treated injured crew members, discovering that Zephyrian physiology was remarkably similar to human. Pete helped repair damaged systems, finding that Zephyrian engineering was elegant and efficient. Amy worked on improving communication systems, learning that the Zephyrians had beautiful poetry and music. Jake spent time with Commander Veltar, learning about Zephyrian culture. They were indeed warriors, but they were also artists, philosophers, and dreamers. They had only become a military society because the war demanded it. Your people are remarkable, Jake said as they watched Pete and a Zephyrian engineer work together on a damaged power relay. You've maintained your civilization despite centuries of war. We have survived, Veltar replied. But survival is not the same as living. What would living look like? Veltar's silver eyes took on a distant look. Before the war, we built cities that touched the clouds. We composed symphonies that could make stars weep. We explored the universe not for conquest, but for wonder. That is the life we have lost. Jake felt a deep sadness for this noble species that had been forced to abandon their dreams. What would it take to get that life back? The end of the war, but that is impossible. The Krillians will never stop expanding. The Nexari will never abandon their quest for unity. And we will never stop fighting for our freedom. Dr. Wade joined them, having finished treating the injured. Commander, I've been studying the casualty reports from recent battles. The pattern is disturbing. Each side loses roughly the same number of ships in every engagement. That is correct. We are perfectly matched in our abilities to destroy each other. Then why continue fighting? Jake asked. If no one can win, why not seek peace? Veltar looked at him with something approaching pity. Because peace requires trust, and trust requires understanding. We do not understand our enemies, and they do not understand us. How can you make peace with beings who think so differently that they might as well be from another universe? Amy had been listening to Zephyrian communications. Commander, I've been analyzing your language patterns. You have over 40 different words for honor and 30 words for duty, but only 3 words for compromise. Compromise is weakness, Veltar replied automatically, then paused. But perhaps that is part of our problem. The repair work was nearly complete when new alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Veltar rushed to a communication panel and spoke rapidly in his own language. What's happening? Jake asked. Long-range sensors have detected your ship. Word is spreading through the galaxy that a new species has made contact with us. The Galactic War Council wishes to meet with you. Jake felt his heart racing. Meet with us. Why? Because in 200 years of war, no one has ever successfully mediated between the 3 factions. The Council is curious about these humans who would risk their lives to help strangers. Dr. Wade looked concerned. Are we ready for this level of responsibility? I don't know, Jake admitted, but I think we have to try. Veltar studied them with those large silver eyes. You truly believe you can help end this war? I believe we have to try, Jake repeated. Because if we don't, millions more will die for nothing. The Zephyrian commander nodded slowly. Then I will escort you to the council. But be warned, Captain Morrison. The representatives of all 3 factions will be there. You will be walking into a room with the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Jake looked at his crew. They were scared but determined. Then we'd better make sure we have something useful to say. As the Defiant prepared to leave the Zephyrian ship, Jake realized that they had crossed a line. They were no longer just explorers. They had become humanity's first ambassadors to the galaxy, and the fate of billions might depend on what they said next. The Galactic War Council station was unlike anything Jake Morrison had ever seen. It hung in neutral space between the 3 warring territories. A massive structure that looked like 3 different architectural styles had been forced together. One section was sleek and blue like Zephyrian ships, another was organic and curved like living tissue, and the third was crystalline and geometric. Welcome to Harmony Station, Commander Veltar said as their escort ship approached the docking bay. It is the only place in the galaxy where all 3 factions can meet without immediately trying to kill each other. Jake studied the station through the viewports. Despite its strange appearance, there was something beautiful about how the different sections connected. How long has this place existed? Since the early days of the war. It was built as a symbol of hope that peace might be possible. Now it serves mainly as a place to exchange prisoners and negotiate temporary ceasefires. Dr. Helen Wade was scanning the station's energy readings. The power systems are incredible. Each section seems to be running on completely different technology. Yet they're all connected. That was the challenge, Veltar explained. How do you make Zephyrian energy systems work with Krillian biotechnology and Nexari psychic crystals? The answer took 50 years to find? Amy Ross looked up from her communication station. If they could solve that problem, why couldn't they solve the war? Because machines are easier to understand than minds, Veltar replied sadly. The docking Procedure was complex, requiring clearance from all three factions. Jake found himself nervous as they waited. In a few hours, he would be sitting across from the leaders of three alien civilizations, trying to convince them to end a war that had lasted longer than human civilization. "Captain," Dr. Wade said quietly, "are you sure we're ready for this?" "No," Jake admitted, "but ready or not, we're here." The station's interior was as strange as its exterior. Corridors changed from metal to organic growth to crystal formations as they moved between sections. The air itself seemed different in each area. Carrying different scents and energy patterns, their guide was a small, floating robot that spoke in three different voices simultaneously. "Welcome, humans. I am Translator Unit 7. I will help you communicate with the Council representatives." They were led to a circular chamber at the center of the station. The room was divided into three sections, each decorated in the style of one faction. At the center was a simple table with 4 chairs. "You will sit here," the robot explained, indicating the 4th chair. "The faction representatives will arrive shortly." Jake felt his heart pounding as 3 doors opened simultaneously. From the blue section came a tall, elegant Zephyrion wearing ceremonial armor. From the organic section came something that looked like a cross between a human and an insect, with 4 arms and compound eyes. From the crystal section came a being that seemed to be made of living light contained in a crystalline shell. "I am Admiral Zareth of the Zephyrian fleet," the blue-skinned alien said, her voice carrying authority that filled the room. "I am Sub-Queen Crixada, speaking for the Krillian Hive," the insect-like being said, its voice seeming to come from multiple sources at once. "I am Crystal Voice Nexara, representing the Nexari Federation," the crystal being said, its words echoing with harmonics that made Jake's teeth ache. Jake stood and tried to project confidence he didn't feel. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, representing humanity. With me are Dr. Helen Wade, our science officer, Amy Ross, our communications specialist, and Pete Collins, our engineer." Admiral Zareth studied them with cold silver eyes. "So these are the humans who have made contact with our forces. You are smaller than I expected." "Size is not strength," Sub-Queen Crixana clicked, her compound eyes reflecting the room's lights. "The Hive has learned this through evolution, but these creatures are unknown to us. They do not register on our biological sensors. They are single-minded beings," Crystal Voice Nexara said, its form shifting colors. "We cannot read their thoughts. This makes them either very dangerous or very useless." Jake felt the weight of their judgment. "We're here because we believe we can help end this war." Admiral Zareth laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Help? You have been in space for barely a century. We have been fighting this war for longer than your species has had written language." "Which is exactly why we might be able to help, Doctor," Wade said, stepping forward. "We have a different perspective." Sub-Queen Crixana's head tilted in a way that reminded Jake of a praying mantis. "The Hive has analyzed your species. You are neither strong enough to defeat us nor numerous enough to overwhelm us. What can you offer that we cannot take?" "Understanding," Jake said. "We've studied your conflict, and we think we know why it can't be won." Crystal Voice Nexara's form brightened. "You presume to understand what we cannot? Your minds are chaos compared to our unified consciousness." Jake took a deep breath. "That's exactly the point. Each of your species is perfect at what you do, too perfect." He gestured to Amy, who activated a holographic display showing the battle patterns they had observed. "Admiral Zareth, your people are incredible warriors. Individual combat, tactical brilliance, technological superiority. But you fight as individuals, which makes you vulnerable to coordinated attacks." The Zephyrian Admiral's eyes narrowed. "Continue." "Sub-Queen Crixana, your Hive can coordinate millions of units perfectly. You can adapt and evolve faster than any other species. But your unity makes you predictable. Once someone figures out the pattern, they can counter your entire strategy." The Krillian representative's mandibles clicked rapidly. "And the Nexari?" "Crystal Voice Nexara, your people have achieved perfect mental unity. You can share thoughts, coordinate perfectly, and process information faster than any computer. But you can't understand minds that work differently from yours. The crystal being's form flickered. You claim to understand us better than we understand ourselves? No, Jake said. We claim to understand the situation better than you do. You're all so focused on your own strengths that you can't see the bigger picture. Pete stepped forward with technical displays. Look at your technologies. Zephyrian energy weapons are perfect for destroying Krillian bioships, but useless against Nexari shields. Krillian swarm tactics overwhelm Zephyrian individuals, but can't function against Nexari coordination. Nexari psychic control dominates Krillian hive minds, but can't penetrate Zephyrian mental shields. It's a perfect balance, Amy added. Each of you can beat one enemy, but always loses to the other. You're locked in a triangle where no one can win. Admiral Zareth stood abruptly. You describe our strategic situation as if it were a game. It's not a game, Jake said firmly. It's a tragedy. Millions of beings dying for nothing. Entire civilizations locked in endless conflict. Resources wasted that could be used to explore the galaxy, to create art, to push the boundaries of science. Sub-Queen. Crixina's voice carried a note of confusion. But if no one can win, what alternative is there? The strong must survive. The weak must be consumed. This is the way of evolution. Evolution doesn't have to mean destruction, Dr. Wade said. On our world, we've learned that cooperation can be more powerful than competition. Different species working together can achieve things that none could do alone. Crystal-voiced Nexara's form pulsed with angry light. You speak of cooperation between species that are fundamentally incompatible. We have tried to unite with others. They resist our gifts? Maybe because you're trying to make them just like you, Jake said. Real cooperation means accepting differences, not eliminating them. The three alien representatives were quiet for a long moment. Jake could feel the tension in the room like a physical weight. You have analyzed our situation, Admiral Zareth said finally, but analysis is not solution. If you are so wise, humans, tell us how this war can end. Jake looked at his crew. They had talked about this moment for days, but now that it was here, the weight of it felt overwhelming. We have some ideas, he said, but we need time to study each of your cultures more deeply. We need to understand not just how you fight, but why you fight. Time, Sub-Queen Crixina clicked. Time is a luxury that costs lives. How much time do you require? 60 days, Jake said. Give us 60 days to embed observers with each faction. Let us learn your histories, your fears, your hopes. Then we'll present a proposal. The three representatives exchanged glances, or what passed for glances among their species. And if your proposal fails? Crystal-voiced Nexara asked. Then you'll be no worse off than you are now, Jake replied. But if it succeeds, the galaxy could finally know peace. Admiral Zareth's silver eyes studied Jake intently. You ask us to trust beings we do not know with the fate of our civilizations. Yes, Jake said simply. Just as we're trusting you not to destroy our tiny ship the moment we leave this station. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, Sub-Queen Crixina spoke. The Hive agrees to this proposal. 60 days. The Nexari will observe, crystal-voiced Nexara added. But we expect failure. Admiral Zareth stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. Very well. 60 days, but know this, humans. If you fail, the war will resume with greater fury than before, and you will be seen as enemies by all three factions. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The human team split up 3 days after the council meeting. Captain Jake Morrison joined Admiral Zareth's fleet aboard the mighty warship Starfire, while Dr. Helen Wade traveled deep into Krillian space on a living ship called the Growing Light. Amy Ross went with the Nexari to experience their crystal cities, leaving Pete Collins aboard the Defiant to work with scientists from all three factions. Jake found life aboard a Zephyrian warship both fascinating and heartbreaking. The corridors were filled with art and music, but it was all about war. Battle songs echoed through the halls, and the walls displayed paintings of famous victories and heroic deaths. Commander Veltar showed Jake through the ship's memorial hall, where the names of fallen warriors covered every surface. Each name represents someone who died believing they were protecting our people, Veltar explained. My brother's name is here, my father's, my grandfather's. How many generations of your family have fought in this war? Jake asked. All of them since it began. War is all we know now. Veltar touched one of the names gently. Sometimes I wonder what my brother would have become if he had lived in peaceful times. He wrote beautiful poetry when he was young. Jake learned that the Zephyrians had once been explorers and builders. Before the war, they had constructed cities that floated among the clouds of gas giants and space stations that harvested energy from stars. They had been artists and scientists, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. What changed? Jake asked Admiral Zareth during one of their strategy meetings. The Krillians arrived in our space, she replied, her silver eyes hard as steel. A scout swarm, they said, just exploring. But wherever they explored, they consumed. Entire asteroid belts stripped clean. Planets left barren. We told them to leave. They refused. So you fought them? We had no choice. But when we drove them back, the Nexari appeared. They said they were bringing peace, unity of mind. They tried to force our people into their collective consciousness. We fought them too. Jake began to understand the Zephyrian perspective. They saw themselves as defenders, not aggressors. Every battle was fought to protect their freedom and way of life. But 200 years of fighting had changed them from builders into warriors. Meanwhile, Dr. Wade was having her own revelations aboard the Krillian ship. The growing light was not built but grown, its quarters formed from living tissue that pulsed with biological rhythms. The walls could reshape themselves as needed, and the ship could literally heal from damage. The hive is not what your people think, Sub-Queen Crixana explained as they walked through a garden section where food was grown. We are not mindless insects. Each individual thinks and feels. But we share those thoughts and feelings with the collective. Dr. Wade watched Krillian workers tending the plants. Each moved with purpose, but they also communicated constantly through chemical signals and touch. It was like watching a single organism with thousands of parts. Your expansion into other territories, Dr. Wade said carefully. The other species see it as aggression. Expansion is survival, Crixana replied. Our homeworld was dying when we developed space travel. Overpopulation, resource depletion, environmental collapse. We had to find new worlds or face extinction. But you could have asked for help instead of taking what you needed? Crixana's compound eyes reflected confusion. Ask? We tried communication. With the Zephyrians when we first encountered them. They attacked our scout swarms without warning. We learned that other species see us as monsters to be destroyed, not neighbors to cooperate with. Dr. Wade realized that from the Krillian perspective, they were refugees seeking survival. Their expansion was not conquest but desperation. The hive mind that others feared was actually their greatest strength, allowing millions of individuals to work together for the good of all. Amy Ross was having the most difficult time adjusting to life with the Nexari. Their crystal cities existed, partially in normal space and partially in some kind of psychic dimension. Walking through them was like moving through a living dream where thoughts became visible and emotions had color. Your mind is chaos, crystal voice Nexara told her as they moved through a library that contained the thoughts and memories of billions of beings. How do you function with such disorder? We call it individuality, Amy replied, trying not to get dizzy from the swirling patterns of light around her. Each human thinks differently. That's how we solve problems, by bringing together different perspectives. But different perspectives create conflict. Unity eliminates conflict. Amy watched Nexari citizens moving through the crystal corridors. They moved in perfect harmony, never bumping into each other, never disagreeing, never seeming to struggle with decisions. It was beautiful but also slightly terrifying. What about creativity? Amy asked. How do you create new art or make new discoveries if everyone thinks the same way? We do not think the same way. We think together. All knowledge, all experience, all wisdom is shared among us. We are greater than the sum of our parts. But as Amy spent more time with them, she began to see the limitations of their unity. When faced with problems that required thinking outside their collective experience, they struggled. They could not understand motivations or behaviors that did not fit their unified worldview. The war began when we tried to bring peace to the galaxy, Nexara explained as they stood in a chamber that showed the history of the conflict. The Krillians were consuming everything in their path. The Zephyrians were building weapons of incredible destruction. We offered to unite them with us, to share our knowledge and eliminate the conflicts that drove them to violence. But they refused. They could not understand the gift we offered. They saw unity as slavery rather than freedom. They chose to remain trapped in their limited individual consciousness rather than join something greater. Amy began to see that the Nexari genuinely believed they were trying to help. Their psychic unity had brought them peace and prosperity, and they could not understand why other species would reject such a gift. Back on the Defiant, Pete Collins was working with scientists from all three factions to develop new technologies. The collaboration was difficult because each species approached problems differently, but the results were remarkable. "Look at this," Pete said to Dr. Ben Clark, a human scientist who had joined the mission. "Zephyrian energy systems are incredibly efficient, but they're limited by power storage. Krillian biotechnology can grow and adapt, but it's slow to respond to rapid changes. Nexari psychic crystals can process information instantly, but they need organic minds to interface with. But if you combine them," Dr. Clark said, studying Pete's designs, "you get systems that are efficient, adaptable, and responsive." Exactly. The hybrid technologies perform better than any single faction's equipment. It's like each species has part of the solution, but none of them have the complete answer. Pete had been thinking about this for weeks. Each faction had evolved to excel in one area but had weaknesses in others. The Zephyrians were brilliant individuals but poor team players. The Krillians were perfect team players but struggled with individual initiative. The Nexari achieved perfect coordination but could not handle diverse thinking when the 60-day deadline approached. The human team reunited on Harmony Station. Each of them had learned things that challenged their understanding of the conflict. "They're not evil," Jake said as they prepared their presentation. "None of them are evil. They're all trying to survive and protect their people. But they're so focused on their own perspective that they can't see alternatives." "The Zephyrians fight because they believe it's the only way to stay free," Dr. Wade added. "The Krillians expand because they believe it's the only way to survive. The Nexari try to unite everyone because they believe it's the only way to have peace." "And they're all wrong," Amy said. "But they're also all right. Freedom, survival, and peace are all important. The problem is that each faction thinks their way is the only way." Pete spread out his technical drawings. "I think I know how to solve this. But it's going to require all of them to give up something they think they need." Jake looked at his team. In 60 days, they had learned more about these alien cultures than anyone had learned in 2 centuries of war. Now they had to convince 3 species to trust each other enough to try something completely different. "Are we ready for this?" Jake asked. "No," Dr. Wade replied. "But we're as ready as we're going to be." The next day, they would present their solution to the Galactic War Council. The fate of billions of beings hung in the balance, and humanity's first attempt at galactic diplomacy would either end the longest war in known history, or make them enemies of every faction in the galaxy. The council chamber was packed with representatives from all 3 factions. Admiral Zareth sat rigid in her ceremonial armor, while Sub-Queen Crixina's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like jewels. Crystal Voice Nexara's form shifted between different colors, showing the emotional state of the Nexari collective. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of the room, feeling the weight of millions of eyes upon him. His crew was arranged behind him, each carrying part of their presentation. The next hour would determine whether the galaxy moved toward peace or deeper into war. "Honored representatives," Jake began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. 60 days ago, you asked us to find a solution to a war that has lasted over 2 centuries. We believe we have found one, but it will require courage from all of you. Admiral Zareth leaned forward. Speak your solution, human. Jake gestured to Amy, who activated a holographic display showing the galaxy divided into 3 territories. The current system assumes that one faction must dominate the others. We propose something different. Instead of fighting for control, we suggest that each faction do what they do best. Explain, Sub-Queen Crixena clicked. Dr. Helen Wade stepped forward. Admiral Zareth, your people are the greatest warriors and explorers in the galaxy. Instead of fighting endless battles, imagine leading a galactic defense force that protects all species from external threats. Imagine exploring unknown regions beyond the galaxy's edge. The Zephyrian Admiral's silver eyes flickered with interest. Continue. Sub-Queen Crixena, Dr. Wade continued. Your people are master builders and adapters. Instead of consuming planets, imagine terraforming dead worlds into gardens. Imagine growing cities and ships for all the galaxy's species. Your expansion could create life instead of consuming it. The Krillian representative's mandibles moved in what Jake had learned was a sign of deep thought. Crystal voiced Nexara. Dr. Wade said, your people are the greatest coordinators and information processors in known space. Instead of forcing unity on others, imagine serving as the galaxy's communication network. Imagine helping different species understand each other without forcing them to think alike. The crystal being's form brightened. You suggest that we abandon our goals? No, Jake said firmly. We suggest that you achieve your goals in new ways. You want to protect your people, Admiral? Leading a galactic defense force would make the Zephyrians the most respected species in the galaxy. You want to expand and grow, Sub-Queen? Terraforming and building would let the Krillians spread to every world without destroying what already exists. You want unity and peace, Crystal Voice? Serving as translators and mediators would help you bring understanding to the galaxy. Pete. Colin stepped forward with his technical displays. We've proven that your technologies work better together than apart. Zephyrian energy systems powered by Krillian biobatteries and controlled by Nexari psychic crystals are 3 times more efficient than any single technology. Amy added her communication analysis. Your languages and cultures complement each other too? Zephyrian honor codes could teach the galaxy about courage. Krillian collective wisdom could show the value of cooperation. Nexari mental techniques could help different species understand each other. Admiral Zareth stood abruptly. You ask us to trust our former enemies with our lives? We ask you to trust them with your dreams, Jake replied. Admiral, you told me your people once built cities in the clouds and harvested energy from stars. Sub-Queen, you showed Dr. Wade gardens that could feed billions. Crystal Voice, you shared with Amy libraries that contained the wisdom of ages. You could do all of that again, but together you could do so much more. Sub-Queen Crixena's voice carried doubt. The Hive has tried cooperation before. Others see us as monsters. Because they don't understand you, Dr. Wade said. But understanding can be learned. We've seen Zephyrian engineers working alongside Krillian biotechnicians. We've watched Nexari coordinators helping human scientists process complex data. It works when people are willing to try. Crystal Voice Nexara's form dimmed. You speak of possibilities but ignore realities. We are too different. Our minds work in ways that cannot be reconciled. That's exactly what makes you stronger together, Amy said. On Earth we have a saying. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Your differences aren't weaknesses. They're strengths that complete each other. Jake walked to the chambers. Viewport, looking out at the stars. Look out there. Infinite space, infinite possibilities, infinite worlds to explore and build and understand. But you're all stuck in this small corner of the galaxy, fighting over scraps when you could be reaching for everything. He turned back to face the assembly. We're offering you a choice. Continue this war until you destroy each other, or work together to build something amazing. Admiral Zarathus' voice was cold. And if we refuse? If we choose to continue as we have? Then in 50 years the galaxy will be a graveyard, Dr. Wade said bluntly. Our analysis shows that the war's intensity is increasing. Resources are depleting, casualties are mounting. Eventually, all three factions will collapse from exhaustion. But if you choose cooperation, Pete added, our projections show exponential growth in technology, exploration, and quality of life for all species. The chamber fell silent. Jake could feel the tension like electricity in the air. Everything they had worked for came down to this moment. Sub-Queen Crixena spoke first. The Hive requires proof. Show us this cooperation working on a small scale before we commit to large changes. Crystal-voiced Nexara agreed. The Nexari demand demonstration. Words are not sufficient. Admiral Zarath remained silent for a long moment, then stood and walked to Jake. You ask us to give up 2 centuries of hatred and fear. This is not easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Jake replied. The Zephyrian admiral studied him with those piercing silver eyes. Very well, we will try your experiment. But if it fails, the war resumes with all our fury. Jake felt relief flood through him, but he kept his expression calm. We propose starting with joint colonies. Small settlements where volunteers from all 3 factions work together on specific projects. Terraforming dead worlds, building new technologies, exploring uncharted space. The Defiant will serve as a neutral coordination vessel, Dr. Wade added. Human mediators will help resolve conflicts and facilitate communication. Amy stepped forward. We've already identified 12 suitable worlds for the first colonies. Each project will focus on different goals, but all will require cooperation between factions. Pete displayed the technical specifications. We've designed hybrid cities that use the best of all 3 technologies. Living buildings that grow like Krillian organisms, powered by Zephyrian energy systems and coordinated by Nexari crystal networks. Admiral Zarath nodded slowly. The Zephyrians will provide defense and exploration expertise. The Hive will contribute biological technologies and terraforming skills, Sub-Queen Crixena added. The Nexari will offer coordination and information processing. Crystal Voice Nexara said. Jake felt history being made in that moment. Then we have an agreement. The first joint colonies will be established within 6 months. The Galactic War Council will oversee the project, with human mediators facilitating cooperation. As the representatives began discussing details, Jake stepped back to stand with his crew. Amy was smiling, Pete was already sketching new designs, and Dr. Wade was taking notes on everything being said. Do you think it will work? Dr. Wade whispered. I don't know, Jake admitted. But for the first time in 2 centuries, they're talking about building instead of destroying. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned ship Harmony, watching the first joint colony take shape on the planet below. Zephyrian architects worked with Krillian bioengineers to design buildings that could grow and adapt. Nexari coordinators helped different species communicate and cooperate. Human mediators facilitated discussions and resolved conflicts. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and cultural clashes. Some projects failed, some colonists requested transfers, but others succeeded beyond all expectations. Hybrid technologies emerged that surpassed anything any single faction had achieved. Art and music began blending traditions from all cultures. Children from different species played together in ways their parents had never imagined. The war was not over. Many military units on all sides remained suspicious and hostile. Some battles still occurred in distant sectors. But for the first time in over 2 centuries, the galaxy was building more than it was destroying. Jake received regular reports from the 12 colonies. Some thrived, others struggled, but all represented hope. The experiment was working slowly and imperfectly, but working nonetheless. Commander Veltar joined him at the viewport. The Zephyrian officer now served as military advisor to the joint colonies. My brother would have liked to see this, he said quietly. He would have been proud of you, Jake replied. No, Veltar said. watching ships from all three factions working together in orbit. He would have been proud of all of us. The galaxy was still vast and dangerous, still full of unknowns and challenges. But humanity had given it something. It had lost something more powerful than any weapon or technology. They had given it hope. And sometimes hope was enough to change